the silent promise. When Sundar Pichai walked onto the stage that evening, the spotlight did not just catch the glint in his eyes. It caught years of quiet struggle, quiet work, and a quieter hope that never left him. The crowd in Delhi buzzed, with excitement, cameras flashing, journalists whispering predictions, but Sundar wasn't thinking about headlines or applause. He was thinking about his mother, Lakshmi Pichai, sitting in the third row, wearing the same green sari she had worn to his graduation 28 years ago. 5 minutes earlier, behind the curtain, Sundar had been adjusting the microphone on his lapel when a voice echoed in his memory. His mother's voice, soft yet unwavering, telling him at age 10, "You don't need to be loud to be strong. Let your work speak, and it will echo louder than any shout." He didn't know then how true those words would become. Tonight, those words wrapped around him like armor. The event was hosted by the Indian Innovation Council. Prime Minister Modi was scheduled to give the closing address, but before that, Sundar had been invited to share his journey. This wasn't the first time he had spoken on stage. He had spoken at Harvard, at Stanford, at Google headquarters, but this was different. This was home. And in that crowd sat the one person whose belief had built his foundation. His mother. As he stepped up to the podium, the silence in the hall shifted. It wasn't heavy, but it was thick with emotion. Sundar looked down at his notes, then decided to speak from the heart. "When I was a child," he began slowly, "we had no telephone in our home. We had one fan, and we had to decide who needed it the most at night. But we had something far more valuable. My mother's belief in us." The room stilled. Many in the audience had come from similar beginnings. Sundar's words weren't just honest, they were familiar. He spoke of how his mother, a stenographer, would walk through the heat to work and how she never complained, not once. He shared how she kept 2 pairs of clothes ironed for him every single week without fail, because she believed he would need them for something bigger. She used to say, "Maybe one day you'll work with computers. I don't know what they are, but I can feel it in my bones." There was a quiet chuckle from the crowd, but many eyes had already begun to glisten. Sundar didn't notice the cameras. He didn't notice the teleprompter. He noticed only one thing: his mother's hands, folded in her lap, the same way they always were when she prayed. He remembered how those hands had sewn his school uniform, repaired his shoes, and served him hot rice when there wasn't much else in the kitchen. Then he paused. Outside, a soft drizzle began to fall. Inside, the air felt heavy. "I'm not here to talk about success," he continued, "because that word never belonged to me. It belonged to the woman who waited for me every evening with a glass of water and 100 questions, even when she was tired. It belonged to the woman who taught me that dignity doesn't come from wealth. It comes from how we carry ourselves when nobody is watching." The audience leaned in closer, as if they knew something was coming. Sundar's voice dropped a little. "What most people don't know is that when I got my scholarship to Stanford, we didn't have enough money to buy the plane ticket. My mother pawned her wedding chain. She didn't even tell me until after I landed. She just smiled and said, 'Do your best, that's enough.'" There was a soft gasp in the room, followed by silence so thick you could hear the heartbeat of the hall. And then, just as Sundar turned slightly to thank the hosts, something unexpected happened. Prime Minister Modi, who had been standing quietly backstage, walked up onto the platform. He held up a hand and gestured to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I would like to invite someone else on stage, someone who shaped this story long before the world heard the name Sundar Pichai." Confused murmurs spread across the hall. Sundar looked around, uncertain. Modi turned to the third row and said, "Lakshmi ji, will you please join us?" It was as if time had frozen. Sundar's mother looked startled. She tried to stand, hesitated, then slowly made her way to the steps with the help of a volunteer. The cameras turned toward her, but she didn't look up. She walked like she always had, gently, quietly, with her head slightly bowed. Sundar watched, frozen, as the woman who had never stepped into a spotlight took her first steps onto a stage meant for the world. When she reached the platform, Sundar's eyes filled with tears. He tried to speak, but his throat closed. Lakshmi smiled at her son, touched his arm lightly, and turned to the audience. And in that moment, the crowd did not see a celebrity, or a politician, or a tech billionaire. They saw a mother. They saw strength in silence, resilience in simplicity, and a love that needed no words. Modi handed her the microphone gently, but she didn't take it. Instead, she leaned into her son and said something only he could hear. Sundar's eyes welled up, and he nodded slowly. The Prime Minister turned back to the crowd. "This is the foundation of India," he said, his voice steady. "Not silicon, not steel, but the hearts of mothers like Lakshmi ji, and the humility of sons who never forget where they came from." The crowd stood, not for Sundar, not for Modi, but for a mother. And just as the applause began to swell, Lakshmi turned and whispered again to Sundar. This time he looked shaken. His lips parted, and for the first time all evening he looked unsure. He took a step back, turned to Modi, and asked, "Can I tell them what she just said?" Modi nodded, and Sundar looked back at the crowd, voice trembling. "She just said, 'Now go home. Your father's waiting.'" And then, as the applause reached its peak, Sundar turned away from the mic, wiping his eyes. He had spoken at the biggest stages in the world, but no speech had ever meant more, because no audience could ever match the power of a mother's quiet voice. The envelope and the silence, the applause still echoed through the grand hall as Sundar helped his mother down the steps, his hand gently guiding hers. She held his arm tightly, as if the weight of the world had finally shifted off her shoulders. The moment had felt eternal, but time had not stopped. Outside the doors, the night was dark, the drizzle now turning into quiet rain. Security guards moved briskly. Journalists crowded behind ropes, and assistants spoke into headsets. But inside Sundar, everything had gone still. They reached backstage, where the lights were softer and the noise dimmed. Sundar was about to turn to his mother and say something real, something simple, when a voice interrupted the calm. "Excuse me?" the voice said. It was old, cracked like a dry leaf, but held a strange authority. Sundar looked up. An elderly man stood by the corridor wall, holding a small wrinkled envelope with 2 fingers. He wore a faded kurta, the kind that had once been white but was now a dull gray, and his sandals looked worn from years of walking. Rainwater dripped from the bottom of his dhoti, and yet he stood tall. "This," the man said, "was given to me by your father. He said, 'One day the world will know my son's name. When that happens, give him this.'" Sundar stared, speechless. Lakshmi gasped softly, stepping forward. "You are Murugan?" she asked. The man nodded. "But we thought—" He raised his hand gently, stopping her words. "I went back to the village after your husband's passing. I stayed away from all this lights, noise, internet. But I kept the promise." Sundar took the envelope slowly. It was light, almost weightless, but his fingers trembled as he held it, as if the paper carried memories he wasn't ready to face. He hadn't seen his father's handwriting in over 20 years. The world knew Sundar Pichai as a calm, composed leader, the face of Google, a man who handled pressure like it was air. But at that moment, standing backstage in a soaked white shirt, holding a forgotten letter from a man he had lost before his first major speech, he felt like a boy again. Like the boy who had waited for his father to come home on a black scooter at dusk, carrying spare parts in a cloth bag, his hands smelling faintly of engine oil and soap. Lakshmi watched her son closely, her hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to open it now," she whispered. But Sundar shook his head. "I need to." He turned toward a chair and sat down. The envelope opened with a soft tear, and inside was a single folded page, yellowed with time. The handwriting was familiar, angular, precise, like the technical diagrams his father used to draw on paper scraps. "Dear Sundar, if you are reading this, then you have done something the world has recognized. I always believed you would. Not because you were the smartest or the fastest, but because you were kind. That was always your greatest strength. There will be lights, cameras, maybe money, maybe even power. But do not let those things speak, louder than your silence. Remember what your mother taught you, that the most important people in the world will never ask for recognition. If you ever feel lost, remember the smell of the old transistor radio. Remember the evenings we listened to cricket matches when we couldn't afford tickets. Remember how you used to ask me questions about every wire, every switch. And remember this above all, you are enough. Not because of your achievements, but because of who you choose to be when nobody is watching. With love. Appa Sundar folded the letter slowly, his eyes moist. The silence between him and his mother felt deeper now, not because of distance, but because of understanding. Nothing more needed to be said. She reached over, touched his face, and gave a small nod, but the silence didn't last long. An assistant rushed in, her eyes wide with urgency. "Sir, there's someone else here to see you," she said, breathless. Sundar stood, confused. "Now?" "Yes, sir. She says she knew your father. She's from Chennai. Her name is Kavita. She said your father helped her years ago, and that she's waited for this day." Lakshmi stiffened. The name hit her like a whisper of something forgotten. Sundar noticed it immediately. "Amma. Do you know her?" Lakshmi's eyes darted to the envelope in Sundar's hand, then back, to the assistant. "She said she knew your Appa?" The assistant nodded. Sundar turned to Lakshmi. "Should we see her?" His mother hesitated. Her voice dropped. "Your father was a quiet man, but he had secrets, small ones, maybe big ones. He believed some truths are better left to time." The words hung in the air like mist. Still Sundar nodded. "Let's meet her." They walked through the backstage hallway, the echo of their steps bouncing off the cold walls. When they reached the side entrance, a woman stood under the awning, soaked from the rain but standing tall. Her hair was streaked with gray, tied in a tight bun. She wore a plain cotton sari, the border slightly torn. But her eyes were full of something Sundar couldn't name. Regret? Gratitude? Both? She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "You're just like him," she said quietly. "Your walk, your eyes, your silence." Lakshmi stood to Sundar's side, arms folded. "I'm Kavitha," the woman continued. "Your father helped me once, when I had nothing, no family, no roof. I was working at the railway station as a cleaner. He saw me not as a poor woman, but as someone who could be more." Sundar frowned. "He never mentioned you?" "He wouldn't," she smiled gently. "He asked me not to tell anyone, ever. But now that the world knows your name, I had to come. Not for myself, but to give you something he gave me." She reached into her cloth bag and pulled out a small, rusted tin box. She handed it to Sundar. "He told me, when my son makes India proud, give this to him. Tell him it holds the piece of me he never saw." Sundar took the box. His hands were still trembling. The lid creaked as he opened it. Inside was a black and white photo. It was of a younger version of his father, standing beside a factory machine holding the hand of a small boy. But the boy wasn't Sundar. He looked up, shocked. "Who is this?" he asked, voice almost breaking. Kavitha's smile faded. "That's my son. Your father raised him too, when I couldn't." Lakshmi stepped back. "You mean he didn't betray you?" Kavita said quickly. "It wasn't like that. Your husband was a kind man. He saw broken people and tried to make them whole. He gave us food, shelter, a chance." Sundar looked at the photo again. A storm of emotions swirled inside him. Confusion, awe, sorrow. The man he had admired all his life, the man whose voice still echoed in his mind, had lived a life full of hidden kindness, unspoken, unrecognized. Lakshmi exhaled deeply. "He never told me. He thought it would burden you," Kavita said softly. "He carried it alone. That was his way." Sundar closed the box and stepped back. His heart was racing. "Where is your son now?" Kavitha looked away. Lost. He drifted, not like you. He had too many questions and not enough answers. I hoped, maybe someday you'd meet. The air around them grew heavy again, not from rain but from the weight of stories unspoken. Sundar held the box tightly, then turned to his mother. I want to find him. Lakshmi looked at him, unsure. I have to, Sundar said. Appa wouldn't want him forgotten. Kavitha nodded. He lives in Madurai now, alone, struggling. He doesn't know who you are. Maybe you can help him the way your father helped me. Sundar looked down at the letter in his hand. I'll go, he said, as soon as I can. And just as he said that, the assistant returned. Sir, she whispered, Modiji is calling for you. He wants you back on stage. He says he has a surprise for your mother. Sundar turned slowly. What kind of surprise? He asked. The assistant smiled. You'll want to see it for yourself. The unseen father as Sundar and his mother stepped back onto the stage. The once roaring crowd had quieted into a soft hum of anticipation. It had been just under an hour since Sundar's emotional speech and the unexpected appearance of his mother, Lakshmi. Yet the air inside the hall had shifted. It was no longer just a celebration of success. It had become a story of roots, of love, of quiet sacrifices long buried beneath headlines and achievements. Lakshmi walked slowly, her green sari still, damp at the hem from the light rain outside. Sundar supported her gently, his mind racing. The envelope in his pocket still felt warm from his father's letter. The old tin box with the photo, now wrapped in a cloth, was tucked under his arm. He hadn't spoken a word since they left Kavitha. His face was calm, but behind his silence something deep was unfolding. Maudi stood at the center of the stage, smiling softly. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he turned toward a large screen positioned behind them. With a simple nod to the technician, the lights in the hall dimmed and the screen flickered to life. A grainy black and white image appeared. The crowd leaned forward. At first, it was unclear what they were watching. The camera shook slightly, then stabilized. A man sat in a simple wooden chair behind a desk filled with papers and circuit boards. He wore thick glasses, a neatly buttoned shirt, and a calm expression. Sundar froze. His breath caught in his throat. It was his father. But this wasn't the father he remembered from home. The quiet man who worked late into the night, who smelled of machine grease and spoke with gentle discipline. This was a different man. He was younger. His eyes were brighter and there was a strange intensity in his voice. The recording began. My name is Raghunatha Pichai, and this message is for the future. For my son, Sundar. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sundar's knees felt weak. Lakshmi gripped his hand, equally stunned. If you're watching this, his father continued, then it means the world has finally seen what I saw in you from the beginning. I never said much, I know. I wasn't the kind of father who said, I'm proud of you often, but I was proud every day. Not for what you achieved, but for how you always stayed gentle even when things were hard. A pause. Then his father leaned closer to the camera. There are things I never told you. Not because I wanted to hide them, but because I believed you would understand them better when the time was right. The image cut to another frame. This time, Raghunatha was standing in front of an old factory gate. Workers walked by in the background. He looked directly into the lens. This was where I spent 27 years. I was just a manager on paper. But what I really did here was listen. To men who had lost their families. To women who worked twice as hard for half the pay. Every month, I used a part of our savings to help someone quietly. We never had much, but we always had enough to share. Sundar blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. This wasn't a part of his father he had ever seen. You remember the transistor radio? Raghunatha smiled faintly. We used to sit and listen to matches. What you didn't know is that I sold my only watch to buy that radio, because you wanted to hear the commentary, and I wanted you to feel the world beyond our walls. A gentle murmur passed through the audience. These were not stories of wealth or power. They were stories of invisible love. There was one more thing, his father said, voice softening. There is someone else you need to meet, your brother, gasps again. Lakshmi's hand flew to her mouth. Sundar looked at her sharply, but she was staring at the screen, eyes wide with shock. His name is Rajiv, his father said. He is Kavitha's son. He is not your brother by blood, but he is your brother by fate. I helped raise him for a time when Kavitha had nowhere to go. I wanted to adopt him, but the world was not ready for that truth. Sundar took a step back. The photo in the tin box, the boy who wasn't him, flashed in his mind. Sundar, Raghunatha continued, you don't have to accept him. You owe him nothing. But if you find him and you can help him find his place, do it not for me, but for the man you've become. The screen faded to black, and the silence in the hall was deafening. Lakshmi turned slowly toward her son. Her eyes were filled not with anger, but a deep, aching sadness. He wanted to tell me, she whispered. I always knew he carried something in his eyes. I thought it was work stress, but it was more. Sundar sat down slowly on the stage, steps overwhelmed. The lights came back on, but he barely noticed. Modi stepped forward. India has seen many stories, he said gently. But this is the story of quiet heroes, fathers who lived without applause, mothers who sacrificed silently, and sons who carry those legacies forward. He turned to Sundar. You have led the world in technology, but now you are about to lead in something greater. Healing, connection, rediscovery. Sundar looked up. The crowd was still silent. All eyes were on him. And in that moment, he didn't see a stage. He didn't see cameras. He saw a crossroads. Behind him was a legacy of silence. Ahead of him, a path to a man he'd never met, a brother lost to time, born of circumstance, raised in the shadows. He stood up slowly, turned to his mother and said softly, Will you come with me to Madurai? Lakshmi hesitated, then nodded. If your Appa believed it mattered, she said, then it does. Sundar turned back to the audience, took a deep breath, and for the first time that evening, smiled, not for the cameras, not for the headlines, but for something deeper. Then he leaned into the microphone. Thank you for celebrating what I've built, but now I have something more important to rebuild. The crowd rose to its feet, and somewhere, beyond the applause, beyond the rain, beyond the lights, a man named Rajiv sat on a broken stool in a small tea shop in Madurai, flipping through a newspaper. He saw a photo of Sundar with Lakshmi on stage. Below it, a small line caught his eye. Google CEO to visit Madurai, seeking to reunite with long-lost family. Rajiv frowned. The tea in his cup trembled slightly. He stood up, not knowing why his hands were shaking, and he whispered to himself, No, it can't be. The message in the train that trained to Madurai was an early morning departure. The platform buzzed with quiet movement. Vendors balancing trays of chai, porters hauling luggage, families gathering under soft yellow lights. It was a different world from the digital spaces Sundar had grown used to. This world moved slower, but somehow it felt more alive. Sundar sat by the window, the morning fog blurring the view outside. Beside him sat Lakshmi, her hands folded in her lap, eyes closed as if in prayer. She hadn't said much since the video had played on stage the night before, and Sundar had respected her silence, though his mind raced with questions. He had slept for only 2 hours, his thoughts circling around the image of his father's face on that old recording, the voice that had crossed time and memory to speak to him directly. More than anything, it was the kindness in his father's tone that haunted him. It wasn't a man asking for forgiveness. It was a man asking his son to carry forward something unfinished. As the train slowly pulled away from the platform, Sundar opened his phone to check the messages piling in from colleagues, journalists, and friends around the world. He scrolled quickly, eyes trained for anything unusual, and then he saw it. An unsaved number. A message with no greeting. Just 4 words. Don't trust your mother. He stared at the screen, blinking. Once. Twice. It didn't make sense. It felt like a prank, but something about the timing after all that had happened sent a chill up his spine. He looked at Lakshmi, who was now watching the trees blur past outside. Her face was calm, but he had seen that expression before, when she had to hide, her worry, when she had lied to him as a child about skipping meals so he could eat. Her silence wasn't always peace. Sometimes it was protection. He locked the phone and tucked it away. Amma, he said slowly. Can I ask you something? She turned to him, offering a faint smile. Of course. Did you know about Rajiv before yesterday? Lakshmi didn't answer right away. She looked out the window again, the reflection of her face caught faintly in the glass. I suspected, she said finally. Your Appa became different during those years. More quiet than usual, more thoughtful. He would come home late sometimes, and when I asked, he would say, not now. But I trusted him. Did he ever mention Kavitha? Lakshmi nodded faintly. Once, only once. He said she was a woman who had lost everything, and that she reminded him of someone. Someone? His own mother, Lakshmi said softly. I never met her, but from what little he told me, she was a woman who carried pain without showing it. Sundar fell silent. The weight of the message in his phone pressed against his thoughts. Do you think he really wanted to adopt Rajiv? He asked. Lakshmi gave a small sigh. He might have, but I think he didn't want to hurt us. He believed in helping, but not at the cost of breaking the family. So he carried it alone. The words echoed his father's letter. He carried it alone. And yet, someone had sent that message. Someone who believed that Lakshmi, his mother, his anchor, was hiding more. Amma, he said again, more slowly this time. Why did you seem surprised when Kavitha came backstage? Lakshmi's hands tightened slightly in her lap. Because I didn't expect her to come back, she said. Not after all these years, and not to you. She was supposed to disappear. Sundar's brows furrowed. What do you mean? Lakshmi's lips pressed into a thin line. There are things I chose not to question, she said. I was a mother. My priority was to keep the house steady. When a storm comes, the roof must not collapse. Sometimes that means pretending there is no storm at all. The train rattled over a bridge. Below, the river shimmered in the rising sun. Before Sundar could say more, a man appeared by their compartment. He was in his 50s, dressed in a faded shirt, carrying a tiffin box. Sundar Anna? The man asked hesitantly. Sundar nodded, surprised. Yes? This is from a friend, the man said, handing him the tiffin box. He said you'd understand. A friend? Sundar asked. What friend? But the man had already turned and walked away, disappearing down the aisle before Sundar could follow. Sundar placed the box on the table. It looked ordinary. Steel, dented on the sides. He opened it slowly. Inside was a small paper envelope and a crumpled photo. He pulled them out carefully. The photo was of a young boy sitting on a bench holding what looked like a toy car. Sundar didn't recognize the face, but behind the boy in the background was a man, standing under a tree. Sundar's breath caught. It was his father, younger, smiling. He turned to the envelope. This time the handwriting was unfamiliar. Sundar, you don't know me, but I know you. I grew up in the same street as Rajiv. I saw what happened when your father left. Rajiv didn't just lose a mentor, he lost something deeper. When he found out who your father really was and what your family chose to hide, it broke him. He believes your family erased him. Your father tried to fix it, but it was too late. If you're coming to find him, be careful. He's not the boy in the photo anymore. No name, no signature. Sundar sat frozen. Lakshmi reached for the photo. "This is Rajiv," she whispered. Sundar nodded slowly. The train rolled on, cutting through villages, bridges, and old railway stations. But inside, the compartment time had slowed again. "Amma," Sundar said, voice firm. "I need to know, did you ever try to stop Appa from helping them?" Lakshmi looked at him for a long time. "No," she said at last. "But I didn't help either. I stayed silent. Because I was afraid of what kindness could cost us. And that is something I carry with me every day." Her voice broke slightly. "Your Appa was braver than I was. He gave more than he should have. And maybe now is your turn to give what he couldn't." Sundar looked out the window. The sun had risen fully now, lighting up the rice fields and temple towers in the distance. He didn't know what awaited him in Madurai, but he knew this wasn't just about finding a person. It was about finishing a promise, a quiet one, a heavy one. Just as the train neared the station, Sundar's phone buzzed again. Another message. Same number. He doesn't want to be found, but someone else does. The Diary of a Father. The train pulled into Madurai Junction with a soft screech, its wheels grinding against the old tracks as it came to a halt. Smoke curled into the hot morning air. Sundar stepped off slowly, his eyes scanning the platform. Madurai had changed since his last visit, but its heart, its rhythm, still pulsed with the same dusty, grounded beat he remembered from childhood. The smell of filter coffee, the sharp honk of auto rickshaws, the muted sounds of a temple bell somewhere nearby. It all returned in a rush of memory. Lakshmi followed behind, her steps a little slower, her face unreadable. Sundar wasn't sure what he expected. Maybe quiet, maybe a chance to breathe before facing the man who might or might not want to see him. But as he took his first step onto the platform, his eyes caught her. A woman stood alone, dressed in a plain sky-blue cotton sari, her hair streaked with silver. She looked somewhere between 50 and 60, her posture straight, her face soft but focused. She held an old cloth-bound book pressed against her chest like it meant something sacred. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. But her eyes locked with his, and he felt the same weight he had felt on the stage when his father's recording had played. He walked toward her. She didn't move. When he reached her, he nodded politely. "You were waiting. For me?" The woman nodded. "My name is Meenakshi," she said. "I was your father's friend. More than that, I was his listener." Sundar looked at the book in her hand. "And that?" She held it out. "This is his diary. His last one. He started it when he began helping Kavitha, but he kept writing in it even after she left, even after he got sick, even after he knew his time was running out." Lakshmi stepped forward. "Why didn't you give it to us earlier?" Meenakshi looked at her, not with judgment, but with something deeper, an old sadness. "Because he asked me not to. He said, 'They will read this only when they are ready, when silence begins to hurt more than truth.'" Sundar took the diary carefully. It was heavy in his hands, not in weight, but in meaning. The cover was frayed, the edges worn. He opened it gently. The first page had only one sentence, written in sharp, familiar handwriting. "This is not a story of success. This is a record of what I could not fix." Sundar sat down on a nearby bench without a word, flipping to the next page. Meenakshi sat beside him. Lakshmi stood behind, quiet, unsure. The diary entries were written in short, clipped paragraphs. His father had never been a man of too many words, but every word he did write carried weight. June 14th. I saw her again today. Kavitha, her son, sat beside her, coughing. She still won't ask for help, but she needs it, so I left food outside her door. She knows it's from me. She pretends not to. July 2nd. The boy, Rajiv, is quiet. He reminds me of Sundar. Curious. But his questions are darker, like he already understands how unfair the world can be. August 5th, Lakshmi asked me if I'm hiding something. I wanted to say yes, I wanted to tell her everything. But if she knew, she would worry. And she has worried enough. October 18th, Rajiv asked me if he could call me Appa. I didn't answer. But when he fell asleep on the floor next to the radio, I cried quietly in the bathroom. Sundar kept turning the pages. Each entry painted a portrait, not of betrayal, but of burden, not of scandal, but of compassion. His father hadn't lived a secret life. He had lived 2 lives, one for his family and one for those who had no one. February 9th, Rajiv's behavior is changing. He's angry, moody. I think he knows he doesn't belong anywhere. He found a photo of Sundar's room and asked why he doesn't have a desk like that. I couldn't answer. March 22. He ran away. I found him at the bus stand. He said he wanted to go somewhere where no one would pretend. He said, "You give me food, but I'm not your son." I didn't know what to say. April 10th, I fear I'm losing him, not because I don't care, but because care is not enough when the world tells a child he is invisible. May Wern. I bought a second-hand camera. I asked Rajiv to take a photo. He smiled. He hasn't smiled in weeks. That smile is now the only photo I have of him happy. Sundar turned to Lakshmi, eyes filled with something he couldn't quite name. Why didn't he tell us all this? Lakshmi sat beside him slowly. Maybe he didn't think we could understand, she whispered. Or maybe he wanted to protect us from the pain of knowing we could have done more. Meenakshi reached into her bag and pulled out a smaller piece of paper folded into quarters. This, she said, was the last note he wrote. He gave it to me just before he passed. He said it was for the day when the world clapped for his son. Sundar unfolded the note. Dear Sundar, if you found Rajiv, don't expect him to thank you. Don't expect him to understand. Just be there, not to fix, but to stand beside him the way I couldn't in the end. And if he asks why you came, don't say because I had to. Say, because I chose to. That is the difference between legacy and memory. Sundar's hands trembled. The world felt both heavier and clearer now. Meenakshi stood up. He lives in a small room near Meenakshipuram. No phone, no email. But he works at a roadside stall, fixing old radios. Radios. Sundar smiled faintly. It was always radios with his father. Always signals. As they left the station, Sundar looked at Lakshmi. Do you think he'll talk to us? Lakshmi didn't answer right away. No, she said, but I think he'll listen. And that is where everything begins. They took an auto to Meenakshipuram. The sun was high now, casting strong shadows across the temple walls. The streets bustled with the usual rhythm. Children running barefoot, vendors shouting, scooters weaving through traffic. They found the stall easily. It was under a banyan tree, a wooden bench with parts scattered across it, circuit boards, wires, a few broken speakers. A faded sign hung above. Old things can work again. Behind the bench sat a man with dark skin, lean, sharp-eyed, with a faint scar across his cheek. He wore a checkered shirt and had grease on his hands. He didn't look up right away. Sundar stepped forward. Rajiv? He asked gently. The man looked up. His eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto Sundar's face. There was no recognition, only suspicion, yes? Rajiv said, voice flat. Sundar smiled softly. I'm the son of the man who raised you. Rajiv stood up slowly, wiping his hands with a rag. That man is dead, he said, and I don't believe in ghosts. Lakshmi stepped beside Sundar. He left something for you, she said gently. Rajiv looked at her, then at Sundar, then he laughed. A short, sharp sound. You came all this way, he said, because you think I need saving? Sundar took a breath. No, he said. I came because he didn't finish something, and I want to. Rajiv stared at him, and then, without another word, he walked away from the stall and into the narrow alley behind it. Sundar turned to follow, but Lakshmi held his arm. Let him go, she said. Sometimes silence needs to echo before it becomes a voice. Just as they turned to leave, Rajiv reappeared. He tossed something at Sundar's feet. A photo, the same one from the tin box. He never said goodbye, Rajiv whispered. So why should you get to say hello? The letter that broke the silence, night fell gently over Madurai, wrapping the city in a hush that softened even the sharpest edges. The air carried the scent of jasmine and monsoon-damp earth, and in the distance a temple bell rang, its sound slow and hollow, like the echo of a forgotten promise. Inside a small guest-house room not far from Meenakshipuram, Sundar sat on a cot, barefoot, with his father's diary in his lap. The fan above spun lazily, humming a tune that matched the rhythm of his thoughts. Lakshmi had fallen asleep in the next room after a long, silent evening. They had not spoken much since Rajiv had walked away, leaving behind nothing but a photo, and words that stung deeper than either of them expected. He never said goodbye. So why should you get to say hello? Those words stayed with Sundar, replaying with each turn of the diary's fragile pages. He was nearing the end now, the last few entries written in shakier handwriting. His father's thoughts had become fragmented, scattered across sentences, as his health had declined, and yet even in the fading strength the clarity of heart remained. July 2nd. I fear time is moving faster than I can hold it. I see Sundar's name in papers now. I hear it on radios. People say he's changing the world. But I wonder, will he understand the world I tried to protect? July 12th, and I've told Meenakshi everything. If the time comes, she will know what to do. Maybe forgiveness doesn't come in this life. Maybe it comes in the next, or maybe it's enough to know that someone tried. And then between the final 2 pages, tucked carefully beneath the binding, Sundar's fingers felt the edge of something smooth. He pulled gently, a sealed letter. The paper was thinner than the diary, pages folded neatly into thirds and bound by a piece of thread. On the outside, in simple, straight handwriting, was a single line, "To my other son, if someday he's ready to listen." Sundar stared at the words for a long time. They weren't addressed to him, they were for Rajiv. His fingers trembled as he opened it. "Dear Rajiv, you may never read this, or you may find it after I'm gone, in which case my words will have to carry what I failed to say aloud. You called me Appa once. I remember that day clearly. It was raining. You had just fixed a broken transistor by yourself, and you smiled as if the whole world had finally noticed you. You looked at me and you said, 'Can I call you that?' And I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want you to, but because I didn't know if I deserved it. I tried to be 2 people, Rajiv. A father to my son and a guide to you. But the truth is, I failed both of you in some way. I chose silence over truth. I chose peace over honesty. And the cost of that was you. You deserved more than food and shelter. You deserved a name, a place, a family. But I let fear, of society, of judgment, of shame, keep me from claiming you. Your anger is not wrong. Your silence is not weakness. It is the voice of a child who waited for someone to say, 'You are mine,' and never heard it. I cannot undo what I failed to say. But I hope that one day when Sundar comes, you will not see him as a shadow of what you lost, but as the light that still carries your name forward. He is not your replacement. You are not his mistake. You are both my sons. Not by blood, but by choice. And if there is anything left in this world stronger than regret, it is love." Appa Sundar sat still for a long time, his hands shaking, the letter resting on his lap like a weight too heavy to lift. His chest ached, not just for his father, but for Rajiv, for the years he had lived in silence, waiting for a name that never came. Outside, the street below had gone quiet. A dog barked once, and somewhere, a radio played an old Tamil song from the 1980s, crackling and faint, like it was crawling out from time itself. Sundar stood. He folded the letter carefully, slipped it back into the diary, and walked to the balcony. The city lights flickered beneath the moon. Madurai didn't sleep. It hummed gently as if listening. The next morning, Sundar walked alone to the small stall beneath the banyan tree. Lakshmi stayed behind, watching him from the guest house steps. She knew this was something he had to do alone, Rajiv was already at work, soldering wires to a dusty circuit board. He didn't look up. Sundar placed the diary gently on the bench beside him. "I read it," he said quietly. Rajiv didn't respond. "There's a letter in the back," Sundar continued. "Written to you. He wanted you to have it." Rajiv didn't move. "I'm not here to fix anything," Sundar said. "You were right. He never said goodbye. But maybe this is something." Rajiv looked at the diary without touching it. His eyes flicked to the cover, then to Sundar, then away. "You think I care about words written too late?" he asked, voice low, bitter. "I don't know," Sundar said. "But he cared enough to write them." A pause. Then Sundar added, "He never gave me that letter. He gave it to someone else. And maybe that means he believed you deserved it more than me." That stopped Rajiv. He looked at Sundar again. This time, the anger in his face softened into something harder to define. Confusion, maybe. Pain. Old wounds scratched open by truth. Sundar stepped back. "I'll leave it here. You do what you want with it." He turned to go. Then Rajiv called out, "Wait." Sundar stopped. Rajiv stood slowly. He picked up the diary, opened it, flipped to the back, read the first line of the letter, and something in his posture changed.